Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders like the founders of P90X, Atari, many more, how they overcome big challenges in life and business. This is part of the e-commerce mastery series where top sellers and experts teach you what really works to boost your e-commerce business. Our sponsor today is Rise25.com, where 6, 7, 8-figure business owners and entrepreneurs come together live and in person every few months to solve their biggest business challenges and leave with lifelong friendships. My favorite book of the week I just want to mention is Time Collapsing by Ed O'Keefe. He actually has several successful businesses. He has 7 kids, and he trains daily on exercise. It's an amazing book, so people can check that out. Today I'm excited. We have Nik Ingersoll. He's co-founder and chief marketing officer of Barnana. His co-founders are Caue and Matt. Barnana is a healthy... The reason I found out about this, Nick, is because I actually had the product. I was eating the product. I love the product. I was like, this is amazing. What's the story behind this product? And I was eating the banana coconut in these little like squares, essentially, and they're like nice and soft, but they're like a good texture to them. And we'll talk about the production process, and I know you have a good story about upcycling, but that's how I found out about it. And when you read their story, it's truly amazing. But Barnana is a healthy organic banana snack with flavors like coconut banana, which I've eaten, banana chocolate, many more. They're in over 5,000 stores, including Safeway and Whole Foods. They're in U.S., Japan, Canada, and Australia. And their company is not just a company, but they do have a mission. Their company is on a mission to end food waste at banana farms. Nick, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
There's so many good questions, and we need to talk about how you relate to fields of sheep, cattle, and horses, which we're going to talk about too. But Japan, that seems random to me, right? How do you get into Japan and Australia?
So Japan is a unique story, actually. Yeah. So one thing that we learned early on, myself, Caue, and Matt, none of us have food business experience, right? Like we weren't, selling any sort of food products. I actually come from a tech background. So does Matt. And Caue comes from a bicycle manufacturing background. And so it doesn't, on paper, make a lot of sense to just start slinging bananas. However, one thing that we learned is that we needed a lot of people around us that were in the food business to kind of help guide us along the journey. So one of the people that helped us the most, his name is Ryan Black. He's the founder of Sambazon Acai, and he had introduced us to this Japanese importer. Yeah. And they just had a great relationship with them. So we met them randomly at an expo and just kind of hit it off from there. So it wasn't sitting down and doing a SWOT analysis of market fit and this whole
we should go to Japan, right?
Yeah. And one big learning lesson actually that I've learned both going into Canada and Japan and Australia now is that the partner is what really makes the difference. It's not necessarily the market fit, although that has to be there certainly. Yeah. But it is really, what is the partner going to do? Are they going to, especially in a place like Japan? I mean, a lot of people in Japan don't speak English. You're going to have a partner that's open to doing social media, Instagram, Twitter, etc., and communicating with people, changing all the creative into Japanese and things. So
the label's completely different. Like do you have one with you? Like, do you have a package with you somewhere?
I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I don't. Yeah.
I tried to save mine, but I just finished it, and I'm like, I'll save the package for the interview, and I just end up throwing it out. And I was gonna just save the package and open it, but I just couldn't wait. So I don't have mine on here, but. So that partner has like distribution channels and other things in Japan?
Yeah. So they do Japanese social media, they procure events, they change all the in-store signage and distribute to retailers, yeah.
Wow. So do you have the same product line in Japan and US, or do you find that certain flavors are, people respond better to in Japan?
So that's a great question, and that's another thing when you're going international is to have someone, our partners in Japan are Japanese, born and raised, right? Yeah. And it's important because, things like peanut butter, which in America is ubiquitous with kind of like Americana and peanut butter and jelly as a kid and all that. The majority of the world doesn't really know what peanut butter is, let alone do they consume it in high frequency. So things like that don't necessarily translate into certain countries. In Japan, it's we have less flavors in Japan as a result.
What's the best-selling flavor in Japan for you?
Best-selling flavor is chocolate.
Chocolate.
I think chocolate's the universal language.
Banana chocolate. Yeah, I guess you could say. So then how did you get into Australia?
So Australia is a very similar sort of story.
Yeah.
This one was actually a little bit more thought out as far as looking at international places that we want to go, why we would go to this place instead of this place, so the UK, Australia, sort of the Nordic countries. And so we found a partner in Australia that was willing to invest a lot of money into going to trade shows and things. That's kind of how that all boiled down. Again, something that we look for, if you put two competing countries on the same docket, and one you have a really, really great partner, you always go with a great partner, even if the opportunity might be a little bit larger in terms of revenue or volume on the other side.
So what countries, you start off in the U.S. and then where do you expand from there? Which country? What was the order of the countries?
It was Japan first, and then it was Canada, then Australia.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I want to start off with, I said, what do we want to talk about? And upcycle. You said there's a good story for upcycling.
Right.
What's upcycling? And tell me the story.
Yeah, so all the bananas that we use in our products, they're all upcycled bananas. So essentially what that means is that when you go to banana farms, about 20%, between 10 and 20% of the bananas that are produced go to waste. And
I would think it's more than that. I mean, I remember I put bananas on my counter and like 2 days later they're all brown. Like, how is it not more than that? But
yeah, well, they harvest them when they're really green still.
I see.
And so in Latin America, a large portion of those bananas go to export. So they get exported to the United States and Europe primarily. Yeah. And so in the countries that we work in, specifically about 80% of the organic banana production is exported. And so the export standards are really, really high to the U.S. and Europe. They have to be a certain size. It can't be nicks, cuts, bruises, like all these things, right? Whereas if you saw those bananas sitting in a pile, you'd be like, wow, these are going to be really good bananas in like 2 or 3 days if I let them sit out on my counter. But they just won't make the journey to these other countries. And so we take those bananas, dehydrate them down in South America, and then import them to California and finish off the process.
What were they doing with them before?
Usually composting them or turning them into animal feed. Occasionally they'll sell them for industrial applications, and usually they're selling them for pennies on the dollar. When the choice is composting them or animal feed, there's a big surplus of bananas to waste.
So how did you discover to even do it this way, right? Because I think most people would then let's just get fresh. I mean, they wouldn't even think to get the waste bananas. They would just get, let's purchase bananas, and the people would just sell them the regular ones. How did you even think to do that?
Well, it's sort of a thing that we didn't. When we first came up with the idea of Barnana and what that was, we wanted to be the brand synonymous with banana-based products. And so we didn't know that there was all this banana waste going on. And, Caue and I, we worked on Barnana as a side project for 2 years before we actually launched. And through doing that and going down to the farms, that's kind of when we discovered that there was a large portion of these bananas going to waste for essentially no reason, just because they won't make it to the U.S. in their fresh forms. So dehydrate them down there and you kind of solve the problem. Yeah,
and yours, I mean, they're not like heavily processed, but I mean they're dehydrated. So like it doesn't matter really what it looks like on the outside for you. You're just going to be dehydrating them and forming into these squares. So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how you started it and why you started it, and it's a really interesting way it started. But I want to talk about, you're the CMO, right? And I saw this picture. It's Guerrilla with a bunch of the team dressed in banana costumes. So I want to talk about some of the scrappy days. And when you didn't have a big marketing budget, what did you do with guerrilla marketing that worked and what just bombed?
Right. So first of all, I am the gorilla in that photo.
Oh, you are the gorilla. I'm like, I looked for you. I'm like, I don't see a guy like an urban beardsman in this picture. Like, where's Nik?
He had a beard all over my body in the form of a gorilla suit that day. And
where was that?
That, I think the one you're referring to, I mean, I've worn that suit all over the place, but I'm pretty sure that was in Kona in Hawaii for the Ironman World Championship. And so we're still super scrappy. One of our core values is think like MacGyver. And we really hold that in everything that we do, right? And so, we're dressed up in banana suits and gorilla suits and running all over the place and doing crazy shit. So There's been some big successes doing a lot of guerrilla marketing. One of the things when we very first started is to really leverage guerrilla marketing and come up with just kind of crazy things. And so I'm always the one that comes up with the crazy ideas, and then I pass it by my two partners, and then it takes some convincing. But eventually it works out usually. I guess one of the more notable ones, and there's actually a few.
Yeah, go ahead with a few. I'd love to hear them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess on the success front, at Expo West, so Expo West is the biggest organic natural food expo in the country, I believe in the world. And so tons and tons of retail. You have to go there. It's just the place to be. And so you're usually confined to this 10 by 10 booth, and you have to pay for all these programs, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously we didn't have any money, so we're not going to pay for any of these programs. So instead, what I decided to do was hire a group of professional breakdancers to dress up in Banana and Guerrilla costumes.
Wow.
Get my whole team to then dress up in Banana costumes, and we just went, as soon as the doors opened, there's like this flood of just humanity where you just can't move, it's like being in a line at a concert or something. It's insane. And so what we did was we got a boombox, started busting out some tunes, and then just having these breakdancers just start breakdancing all over the place. And, people are taking photos, and obviously, we have big signs with a hashtag that we were using. And that proved to be very successful, although I will say with the caveat that we did almost get kicked out of the show.
I was going to say, how fast did security get on you for this?
They were on us pretty fast, but we just ignored them for like a solid 20 minutes.
Really?
So.
They just stood by and were watching?
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah, our general mantra is, do push the limits as far as you possibly can without getting arrested.
Yeah, and it's not like you were disturbing the peace or anything. It's all good fun.
Yeah.
So tell me, so you do that, right?
Sure.
What kind of attention? What I don't know. Are people posting on social media? Are there certain people then you can go up and have that conversation? How do you use that and then use it for the relationships in the actual expo?
Yeah, so I think that the expo itself, it's just, you're arbitraging for attention. And there's so much clutter and so many giant booths. And, if you're looking at a Cliff Bar booth or something like that, it is enormous. I mean, they're spending, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars on some of these booths. There are 2 or 3 tiers of the sky. And so if you're a smaller brand, I mean, you really just got to do some craziness to get some attention.
Right.
And so a lot of the industry really does thrive on momentum. And if you can get people just talking about what you're doing, and that show specifically is for industry folk, it's not open to the general public.
Yeah.
What you have to do is just get a groundswell of people, get some buzz going on, and then people are there for 3 days, and pretty soon you just start hearing, oh my God, I heard about you guys doing this and that and the other. And then you follow up with emails, you capture all the emails at the booth, and you send them a recap video of people breakdancing. So you definitely have to integrate it throughout everything that you do. But yeah.
So what kind of good has come out of the expo for you?
So the first expo that we ever went to, I guess going back to being scrappy, this is pre-raising our first round of capital. So we had a sample run of the chocolate Barnana. We bought some bananas from South America. So we had the original and the chocolate product, which the original is just banana cut up. And
was there coconut in the original or just banana?
Just banana.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, we didn't have money to spend. We didn't have actual packages or anything like that. So we went to FedEx Kinko's, printed out some stickers, bought some pouches on Amazon, stickered them up, made them look pretty, put them in a glass case, didn't give them out. And then we had, bulk to sample. And so once we did that, we actually landed Whole Foods in March of 2012.
That's huge.
We didn't have any actual product to fill. So as soon as we got the order, we're like, well, I guess we should probably start producing some product. So,
how did they decide to do? What's the decision-making process for them? Because that sounds like pretty quick.
The decision-making process in the entire industry is strange. It's kind of archaic. Whole Foods is unique in that they have a decentralized buying model. So they have regional buyers who get to decide, where you go in their region. Yeah. However, really, you're presenting to one person. It's not like an oligarchy, right? Yeah. So this one person, depending on their personal taste, views on life experiences, the whole bit, they get to make the decision in a lot of ways. And so it really does hinge usually on one key person.
Yeah. So that particular person, what do you think are the biggest factors? They're like, this is amazing. My kids love bananas. I mean, what was their background that they said instantly, we need to get this in Whole Foods?
Well, I think one thing that we've always had going for us is that we're highly differentiated. So there's no banana brand other than us. There's no one branding the banana, the fruit itself. And when we went and told that story to that buyer, it was really, really compelling.
Yeah. So then, okay, you make a huge sale to Whole Foods. Now what do? You need...
Now we scramble.
Right. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it was, let's see, March 2012. We launched officially in August in stores. And so what we did was we had to go out and raise some capital because the thing
right away.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, if you don't have personal wealth, which I certainly didn't, you don't have any money to produce a product. And if you want to produce product for Whole Foods and do it the right way, there's going to be some inventory holding costs and, some cash flow issues that you got to think through.
So was that an easy pitch to an investor? Like, we have this order from Whole Foods, or is that a hard process?
It was actually a pretty easy pitch, more easy than I'm willing to admit, just because, like I said, we're highly differentiated. The market opportunity is massive. Bananas are the number one selling fruit in the U.S., sells more than apples and oranges combined, and no one has branded the banana, kind of like Palm Wonderful did for the pomegranate, except for the pomegranate is such an esoteric, strange niche fruit. And so, the investors were excited kind of really right off the bat. And once you have a Whole Foods knocking at your door wanting product, it's a lot easier to raise capital as well.
Yeah. So, Nick, was that the plan going in? I mean, obviously, like with a startup, you have a plan and it never gets executed or never happens the way you think it happens. Was that the plan to go in there and be like, okay, let's get Whole Foods and then we'll get an investor? What was the plan up to that point? Like, what were you thinking?
Well, the plan was we were going to raise capital.
That was always your plan. Okay.
Yeah. And so, if you want the rocket ship growth with a physical product like that, you're going to have to raise capital, right? Yeah. If you want to, call it $1 million, $2 million in the first year and grow 200 to 400% year over year, it's tough, man. If you want to even double your business, you're going to have some cash in the bank. So, we were prepped and ready to experience the explosive growth from an early stage. A lot of times there's two different models, especially in the food business, that happen. You have kind of your mom and pop. I'm going to go to the farmer's market. I'm going to make some bars in my kitchen, sell those, and eventually build it into some sort of lifestyle business, hopefully. Right. And there's the other side of the spectrum where I'm going to raise a $10 million round, Series A, and just blast it all over the place, which oftentimes isn't the best either. Right. And we fit somewhere in the middle of that. Yeah. So,
because I think I remember reading, Nick, you guys spent a long time trying to find the right partners, like distributors, suppliers. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a long process.
When you're dealing with people in Latin America and especially banana farmers, it's a tough process. You have to make sure that a lot of systems are in place, a lot of QA. The scariest part about being in the food business, quite frankly, is that, and one of the most rewarding parts is that people are taking your product, they're eating it, and it's literally contributing to their life. Like it is what's keeping them alive is food, right? Yeah. So it's this weird, unique sort of experience, different than selling an internet-based product or a software or something of the sort, which I used to do. And so QA has always been on the top of my mind. I have to make sure that all that's in place, that nobody ever gets, God forbid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go into the backstory because I don't want to paint the picture for people like, oh, yeah, you just have these things, you show up at an expo and like Whole Foods. Because I know you guys spent years putting the systems in place, at least finding the right. And you have a background in agriculture also. I mean, you said tech, but you have a background for early on in agriculture as well. And so there was a lot that went into it up to that point, I want to ask about that, but first I have to ask, so those are some efforts that worked, and I want one more that worked, and I want what didn't work. And I don't know if it's the Ironman that you want to talk. I don't know if that one worked really well, or is there another one that's a good story to tell of what your guerrilla marketing efforts?
I'm gonna one up the Kona Guerrilla story.
Okay.
For one that worked, and then I'll give you a great one that didn't work also. And so this one also centers around the Expo. And so what we just and actually kind of just around our brand in general. So what I decided to do is launch a fictitious product.
Okay.
And we unveiled it in March of this year. You can go to guerrillamilk.org and find out all about it.
Like gorilla spelled like the animal or like the market?
Like the animal.
The animal, okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
So what we did is 2 weeks prior to Expo West, I started a social media email campaign, and it was that our new product unveiling, because we usually unveil a new product every year at Expo West. This year we didn't. We've been focusing on distribution, innovation. I said to everyone that we're going to be producing a 100% grass-fed, fair trade, free-range gorilla milk from mother gorillas, and the internet exploded. And as you can imagine, you have some people that are like, "Oh, this is too oniony to be true." You have some people that are like militant vegans that are about to burn houses down, and a lot of people that are just kind of in the "what's really going on" sort of stage. And so we built up a lot of momentum, sent a series of emails, and then the reveal at Expo West, which was on the last day, was that it was a big PSA about just because you can milk a gorilla doesn't mean that you should. And I think that being a force of change for good in the food industry, especially right now, is really important. It's much easier to just use pesticides. It's much easier to factory farm. It's much easier and cheaper to do all the sort of shit that's just not good for humanity. And so it turned into a big PSA, and at the end of the day, everybody was kind of happy, and that was a good one.
So what was the reaction at the end? Were people mad, like, why did you say this? Or were people just, like, laughing? What was the general consensus?
It was mostly laughter, and kind of like, that was a good one. And then we also served a bunch of, vegan gorilla milk-looking drinks at the thing. So we had basically pina coladas for everybody to enjoy at the unveiling.
So was that your idea? How does this idea even come about? Like, I mean, obviously your interesting, strange mind works in marketing ways, but was that you, or how does that get flushed out?
Yeah, it was me. Like I said, usually all the crazy ideas, you can pretty much bet that I came up with them, and then had to really try hard to convince other people.
Yeah, how did your co-founders let you get away with that? Was there pushback on that?
Yeah, so we were actually at a board meeting, and we were talking about just innovation in general, and another one of our core values is always innovate, always create. And so, there's a lot of different ways to innovate, right? You can innovate on the marketing front, you can innovate in distribution channels, you can innovate with product. And traditionally, we've always innovated with the product every single year. This year, we weren't going to do that. And, our investors were like, that's okay. And our investors, by the way, are industry veterans, angels, people that have been operators and entrepreneurs in the food space before. So they have just awesome feedback all the time. And so, we're sitting there. I'm like, well, why don't we just introduce a fictitious product? And they kind of look at me. I'm like, yeah, we'll call it gorilla milk. Like, we're milking mother gorillas. They all just look at me. There's like a pause in the room, and they all start laughing, Yeah,
that can go one of two ways. They can kick you out, or they can all start laughing.
Yeah, and then, I talked to Caue about it afterward. I'm like, hey, man, I'm serious about this gorilla milk thing. Like, really do it. So I do all of our design at Barnana also. So I designed a little mock-up package and sent it to them. And then I think that's what got everybody over the hump. As soon as they saw the packaging, they're like, well, that's kind of cute. We should probably. So
people can still go to guerrillamilk.org? It's still
up?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. So just briefly, talk about the Kona event, too. I mean, that was really interesting. And obviously, Caue is he was a professional triathlete, right?
Yeah, he was a professional triathlete.
Yeah, so it kind of goes into that. But this was at the Ironman.
Yeah, this was the Ironman World Championship in Kona. And actually, to parlay off of your previous question, we had a decent failure point at Kona. So there's this big bay in Kona where everybody swims. And it's Kona, Hawaii. It's a beautiful place, all these things. And so we had bought a 20-foot-long yellow banana with our logo on it from China. And we swam it out in the morning at just the break of dawn. So we're swimming with this 20-foot-long inflatable banana into the ocean. And we tied a brick to it So
This sounds like a well thought out plan.
So everybody who's training and walking around this whole area, there's just this giant banana in the middle of the bay, and everyone's just like, "What is that thing?" You know. And so it was really awesome for about not quite a day, and then the Ironman Gestapo went out there and stole it from us and popped the thing and took it away, and so it was a great idea, but it didn't exactly execute the way that we wanted it to.
A day is pretty good, actually. I would think it would get popped way earlier than that, so that's good.
Yeah.
So what has not worked?
Well, that was one that didn't exactly work.
Yeah.
We put it out, the event is like a week long, really. And so our idea was to have everybody want to swim out to the balloon all week, and it lasted 8-10 hours, and it was gone. So that was a decent failure. It was a decent one.
Any other interesting ones to talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, keeping with the Ironman theme, actually at the same Ironman, there's a thing called the Undie Run. And so the photo that you saw actually was right after the Undie Run. I had a GoPro strapped to me in this whole thing, and what I decided to do was put underwear on the Guerrilla suit and then run around in the Guerrilla suit amongst all these other people, doing the Undie Run. And there's this big sort of gathering before the Undie Run, and the promoters
are people actually in their underpants, or what's? Oh yeah, everyone's just in their underpants for this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, triathletes, they're usually running around in Speedos anyway, so for them, So I show up in the Guerrilla costume. We have a bunch of people in banana suits, and there's I don't know how many thousands of people in this gathering, and you have the promoter of Ironman on stage, and he just calls all of us out and starts this chant, "Take off the suits! Take off the suits!" And it turned into a complete and total shit show. We didn't take off the suits, but it was an intense moment.
So you have the whole crowd turned against you?
Totally.
Nick, what's interesting is I want to get into some of the background story because it's, you're a fun fact about you that most people wouldn't know is you love and go bow hunting, and you used to work as a ranch hand. So, what did you do as a ranch hand? What's your job?
My official job as a ranch hand was to essentially restrain the cattle in the summers usually, and they would come and brand them, give them antibiotics.
So talk about restraining. I mean, this is not like you have them on a leash. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, nobody's putting them in sweaters and walking them on a leash, that's for sure. So essentially the way that it works, you have the owners of the farm, usually a couple cowboys. They're on their horses. There's a giant, maybe 500 head of cattle, sometimes 1,000 depending on how big the farm was. And so they would essentially take the cattle one by one, chase them through a little gate, and then at the end of the gate there was me and one other person, and then we would run next to the cattle, grab them and tackle them on the ground and hold them in a headlock or a leg lock while they come and get branded.
Wow. We have to put the disclaimer: no animals were harmed when you had them in a headlock. So
yeah, I didn't choke them out unconscious.
Yeah, do you do if you could wrestle a cow and hold it with a headlock, do you do like jiu-jitsu or any of these other? You do.
Yeah, I do jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how you train. Maybe that's how Conor McGregor should train. You should tell him to be a ranch hand for like a summer.
We got a fight coming up with Nate Diaz this weekend, so.
Get Barnana in his hands. Be like, you could be. I'll tell you how I trained. So tell me about growing up in Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, what was it like?
For a lot of people, I would imagine the majority of people who listen to the show are going to be people who either grew up in a suburb or in a city. Most of the people that I know did. And so I grew up out in the country on a dirt road, there was a sheep pen across the dirt road from us. And so, me as a child was just running around in the country just doing basically whatever you wanted to do. Yeah. And so, we'd go and then shave sheep and wrestle cattle and the whole bit. So, it's definitely a much different place. In a lot of ways, it's still stuck in the old West There's still a lot of like covered wagons along the Oregon Trail and
Really?
pioneer graves, and
Wow.
and that's sort of a metaphor for the whole area and the way that the economy and society works there. It's very slow and much different than where I live now.
So what did your parents do when you were growing up?
So my dad, he actually worked for the city. I grew up in sort of a blue-collar household. He was disabled at a relatively young age.
Really?
Yeah, so he essentially raised my brother and I, and my mom was a nurse.
So, what did you want to be when you grew up early on?
Well, my earliest recollection was to be a firefighter,
Right.
and the reason is because my dad was a volunteer. There's no paid firefighters, FYI, in Nebraska. There's just not a lot of people to start fires in that
Everyone
area.
volunteers, yeah.
Everyone volunteers, yeah. So firefighting was always like this really cool, sort of thing, and a very boyish dream, right, is to be a firefighter. But early on, I realized that one of the more important things to me is to not have to struggle, to not have to look for my next paycheck, to not have to switch jobs and figure shit out. And we had some tough times growing up, and as I grew up, it was like, man, I'm gonna have to make this life work for myself and not have to rely on anybody else. And so once I got that thought in my head, that was my earliest thoughts of entrepreneurship and working for yourself and doing the whole thing. So it's been that way for a long time.
So were you in high school when you were thinking like that, or at what point?
Yeah, about 8th grade. Middle school.
So then what did you do growing up? Because you did some entrepreneurship, like businesses activities, right?
Oh, yeah, I did all kinds of weird things. I used to... So gum was essentially banned in middle school, so I started a little gum stand outside the school for a while. Sold some gum. That was relatively profitable for like a 11, 12-year-old kid. So that worked out pretty well. Everyone was like addicted to gum, I swear, as children. Let's see, what else did I do? I mean, I sold a lot of stuff at garage sales. I would go and I would buy a bunch of cards and coins and things like that at garage sales, and I would go to this cards and coin store down in the nearest town, and I would sell it there and try and make money. I'd always been a saver, so I'd never really spend the money. I would just keep it, in this little envelope. And then eventually I started producing a lot of fine art, and so I do a lot of mixed media, a lot of paintings, and I would show them at galleries and sell them and kind of build my name in the Midwest.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
Where do you think you got that from? Because I can imagine people in your hometown, I don't know, but do people just they want to stay there, right? It's comfortable for them. Is that typically the mentality? Like, I'm going to stay here, stay in the town, and do whatever that entails?
Totally. I mean, there's
you thought differently from everyone else. Why?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that, from a young age, I didn't grow up in the town itself. I kind of grew up in the country on, an island away from, I couldn't just go to a grocery store or something like that.
Yeah, what did that look like? What do you mean? So what did you do for food? Like, you couldn't just go to a grocery store. What does that look like when you want milk or whatever?
Well, I mean, my parents would eventually go there and buy groceries for the week or 2 weeks or something like that. But I couldn't just go get a Mountain Dew real quick, and we weren't allowed.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
We didn't have any video games or anything like that. So, it was a lot of drinking water and playing around in the fields and building forts and, taking care of the sheep and things like that growing up.
So, fast forward to college for a second. So, how do you meet your co-founders?
Right. So, I decided to leave Nebraska as soon as I graduated high school. I actually concocted this plan about the same time, maybe 13 years oldish, that I'm going to go out to California and go to college. Like, that was the whole thing.
Really?
My parents were very against, which everyone along the way was like, don't do that. People in Nebraska tend to have a very small town mindset, in western Nebraska, to be clear. And so went to college. I was part of a lot of different organizations, one of which was the American Marketing Association. Yeah. And that's when I met Caue. At the time, I was doing a lot of design and marketing consulting. So, I designed logos and branding and helped them out with their SEO strategies and whatnot.
Was this part of like Candy Lab, or is that after?
That was right before.
Okay.
So Caue and I actually worked on Barnana as a side project while I was running Candy Lab for 2 years. And so I met Caue. He had a bicycle manufacturing company at the time, so I was trying to pick up a client. He was trying to find people that wanted to intern. And then we started talking about this Barnana thing. Started working on it as a side project, like I said. Shortly after, I co-founded Candy Lab. And then, Barnana actually came to fruition in stores about 2.5, 3 years later.
So those early conversations, Nick, about Barnana.
Yeah.
And that was because of Caue's dad?
Yeah, exactly. So Caue grew up in Brazil, and these dehydrated banana snacks have been in Brazil for a long time. And I like to, make an analogy to coconut water or acai. So coconut water, acai, they've been in Brazil for like 40, 50 years.
That's normal to them.
It's normal, yeah. And it really broke out into the American market relatively recently. So, in the mid-2000s, you saw coconut water come to the U.S. and kill it, Zico and Vita Coco and, the whole bit.
Yeah.
And so, this product was in Brazil. His dad used to make them in the backyard, dehydrate these bananas. And, Caue's like, these bananas are in Brazil. There's coconut water coming here. There's acai coming here. I think that this could be the next thing. And we started looking into it and finding out how popular bananas are relative to coconuts and certainly relative to acai, which there was no market for it. It just started to make a lot of sense.
So what do you do first? So you guys have this discussion. He's doing his thing with the bike manufacturing. You're doing your thing with the candy lab. What do you do to start this process of, you say you start working on the side. What does on the side look like at that point?
Yeah, so on the side, what that looked like, we would go to what was his roommate's office at the time. And so his roommate had this nice office technology startup company. And we would kind of go into the corner on this little table and work on Barnana things about 3 times a week. And so we started out with the branding. I think that one of the most important things, especially early on, is to build something that looks legit, whether you have a product or not. Yeah. Build a brand that looks really, really believable for a lot of different reasons, both from consumers and investors, et cetera. And then Caue started going to South America, trying to find banana farming partners. Obviously, he has all of his family in Brazil. So we started looking in Brazil first. We decided Brazil is probably not the best country right now. It's one of the BRIC countries. There's a lot of volatility. So we started looking in other countries near Brazil. And then we were trying to find packaging. And like I said, we were brand new to the game. So there was a lot of learning lessons. Started cold calling people off of LinkedIn, looking for advice and, building an advisory board. So there was a lot of upfront work for sure.
What was the original, Nick, what was the original vision of the product itself? Because I can imagine, what were the first iterations of it? Because I can imagine it doesn't look or probably feel or taste like it does now. Because, if people can picture, I wish I saved some, but I ate them all. They're like little cubes, right? They're kind of dark, and whether the one I had was coconut, so it's got coconut shreds and a whole banana in it. What was the initial product? What did it look like?
Yeah, so right now we have 2 different product lines essentially in one. So 3 of the products are coated. So it's a banana center coated in chocolate or coffee coating or peanut butter.
Gotcha.
And then the other 3 are like the coconut. So they're
all
kind of
mixed together. Yeah.
Yeah. And so originally we launched with original and chocolate. And we weren't exactly sure if we wanted to do it in a bar format, your traditional flip bar format, in a pouch. We didn't know if we wanted to do, a banana brownie sort of deal where it's kind of like a bar, but we market it as a brownie. It was really up in the air because in Brazil, the way that it's typically sold is that you just have these dehydrated banana fingers, and they're really, really sticky, and they're just wrapped up in cellophane and sold on street carts and corner marts and things like that. Right. So, we knew we had to make it look and feel different for the American consumer, make it more convenient. So we decided to cut it up. We actually cover the original in banana flour so that it doesn't stick to your fingers, because that was a big problem when we were testing it. And so, it definitely went through a lot of iterations. But the original product that you would see previous to us messing with it, it's not that easy to eat.
Yeah, so why did you decide on the cubes as opposed to the bars or the brownies or anything like that?
Yeah, so when we started doing the market research and going into it, you look at the bar set, and it definitely is one of the most high traffic areas of the store, but it's also the most cluttered, the most competitive. Yeah. Very hard to differentiate yourself. And when you look at the space on the shelf, you get about this much space for your branding to shine through. Yeah. And that's tough, man. And so we decided to launch with pouches instead.
So from a producing manufacturing, is it any easier or hard to do what you're doing as opposed to the bar? Because I can imagine, I would think it'd be harder personally, because now you have all these little cubes, you got to get them in a pouch as opposed to just a bar. I don't know.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. It is much more difficult to do the pouch with our product specifically. It's semi-automated. There's still some manual components to it, especially with the cubed product like you had. Manufacturing it's not the easiest thing, especially because bananas, it gets really dense because we take the water out of them, and really, really sticky. So machines get gummed up. There's definitely some struggles on that front.
So what's been the biggest challenge from the manufacturing side of things?
I think the biggest challenge is making sure that we make the uncoated items like the coconut, the apple cinnamon specifically, easy to cut, finding the right machinery, and automating the process. So right now, like I said, there's still a manual component to the uncoated items that, we're just experiencing higher costs than we should. It's an ongoing challenge, getting the right ingredient makeup, the ratio to coconut to banana and how that affects the machine, getting different machines, trying new ones. You never quite know how well the machine will work once you get it, talking to different co-packers and seeing what they suggest. So right now, that's probably the biggest challenge.
So the coating is actually easier.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, the coating is easier. One of the challenges with the coating, of course, is the bananas are so damn sticky that you have to break them up so that they get, coated one by one instead of in globs. So that can be a challenge too.
I see.
But
yeah, so they're not all sticking together once the chocolate melts or something or hardens or something like that. Because you do all this and then you bring it in here to package, right? You bring it into the U.S. to package?
So we dehydrate the bananas in Latin America, and then we import them, and we do everything else. You
do everything else there?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing. So how long are you working on to the side until you drop the other project, your other business? Because that's a hard decision, right?
It was tough, man. It was damn near 3 years, 2.5 years, something like that. Leaving one baby and starting a new one is always a tough thing. I mean, I still serve as an advisory. I have an advisory role with Candy Lab, and they're doing a lot of great things.
What does Candy Lab do? Branding and creativity stuff?
Yeah, so we started as a branding house and an SEO firm, and then we moved into augmented reality. So Right now we have an augmented reality platform, kind of like Pokemon Go, which is possibly the best thing ever to happen to Candy Lab because now people know what augmented reality is.
Right.
And so Candy Lab essentially builds white label apps for businesses in the augmented reality space.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you decide this is now the right time to work on Barnana full time?
It was a complicated set of circumstances. There's a lot of interpersonal things that happen. There's a lot of different sorts of struggles and things pulling you different ways. For me, I wanted to be involved in a physical product that made a difference in people's lives. And so that's what I decided to do, ultimately.
When did the third co-founder come into play with Matt? Matt came on, right?
Yeah. So Matt came on early stage right before we launched as well. He actually worked for Caue's roommate, whose office that we were using for like 2 years on the side. So he had kind of seen it. He was, very interested in the brand the whole way through. And so he came on, before we launched also.
So how do you come up with the name?
So Barnana. We like to say that the banana is nature's original energy bar.
Yeah.
It comes in its own package. It's already in the shape of a bar. The only problem is the packaging sucks. It goes bad in like 3 days. Yeah.
Barnana. So that was an easy decision.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice work with that.
And the interplay between the R and the N with the logo kind of helps.
So, Nick, I wanted you to talk about the products because obviously the more lines you release, it's harder. You have more product. What was the first product, and then how do you decide and when do you decide to release the next flavor?
So that's always a tough question.
Yeah.
It really is, and especially at this stage, it's even more difficult. At the beginning, you don't want to be a one-trick pony, and so just having 2 SKUs, it's not enough to say that you're the brand synonymous with banana-based products, right? It's just not. So the next year, we knew we had to innovate and launch 2 new products. The year after that, we knew we had to innovate and launch 2 more. So we have 6 flavors in 2 different sizes, 12 SKUs total now. And in March of next year, we're going to be releasing a new product line that's actually different from the Chewy Bites, which is really exciting. But, early on, we knew we had to innovate. We have to stay relevant. And to be the brand synonymous with banana, it's going to take a lot of products to do that. So we planned early on.
Yeah, I'm curious because it could apply to anything. It doesn't have to be physical or even edible, but for even, a tech startup, releasing a different product or feature set or whatever the case is. So what was the first, second, third product? I want to hear how you decide what the next flavor is.
Yeah. So we did some consumer research. So we sent out surveys, kind of saw what people liked, what they didn't like. We did that whole thing. We looked at what was currently available in the set that we sold in. So, where are we at in the store? Who do we sit next to? What do they have? What don't they have? And where are the holes at? That's where we started. And then once we do that, we make a bunch of different prototypes, actual physical edible prototypes, test them out, see how they taste. Because in concept, it may sound really awesome, right? And then in practicality, it's like, well, that's not exactly what we were going for,
right,
or something like that. So I think that one of the most important things before launching a new product is to really make sure that the current products that you have are selling well and doing what you want them to do. Because what you don't want to have happen is all of a sudden you have 8 products and 2 of them sell well and the rest are kicking rocks, and pretty soon you're gonna have to start discontinuing things, and that's not a good look. You don't want to do that.
So the first product was just the straight banana product?
Yeah, we launched with the original and the chocolate.
And the chocolate. And so what was the next one after the chocolate?
The coconut and peanut butter. So
tell me about the coconut one.
Yeah.
Is that from customer feedback? Is it from personal preference of the team, or both? How do you decide on coconut?
Well, coconut's a very polarizing flavor to begin with. So some people really love coconut,
right,
and some people just hate it for whatever reason. And so for us, that's what the data showed too. When we did all the surveys, some people rated it as their most favorite and their least favorite, and there wasn't a lot of in-betweens. But it did rank really, really high. It ranked actually number 1 as far as all the new flavors that we wanted to introduce.
Really?
Peanut butter was second. And then once we made the product, it tasted really good. The texture was really nice. And so, the flavor combinations, it's a tricky thing. So, you have banana and coconut, but if you take banana and pineapple, it just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't
mix
taste
well
good together.
Yeah.
It tastes great. Pineapples taste great. You put them together, and it just doesn't quite work out. So, getting that combination is crucial and tough to do.
Which is your personal favorite?
Personal favorite's definitely the apple cinnamon.
Apple cinnamon, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But I'm a sucker for cinnamon, so I'm biased.
Got it. All right. I'm gonna have to try the other flavors because I've had the organic coconut banana a few times. I'll have to branch out a little bit. Nick, I want to talk about some of the milestones of the business. And so you guys are essentially early on bootstrapping it, doing all the hard work, the background research. When do you hire your first team member, and who do you decide to hire?
Right. So our first team member that we decided to hire, it was a little weird how we got to it. So we started out by building.
That's what I like about it. Yeah.
Yeah, we started by building an advisory board.
You did.
So they weren't paid people, right? And that helped us a lot. That helped us delay hiring people with knowledge, right? And then once we did that, we had some success on the East Coast with Wegmans, is another big retailer out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we knew we needed somebody to manage that out there. We ended up hooking up with a New York City distributor, and in New York, you pretty much have to go with a DSD if you want to be successful in all the bodegas and small markets. It's a very, very different place than the rest of the country, or any other city for that matter.
Yeah.
And so we knew we had to do that. And with working with a distributor, one of their caveats was that we needed to have a full-time person in New York City catering to all those accounts.
Mm.
And so, that combined with Wegmans, it just made a lot of sense to have somebody on the East Coast, because we can kill it in our backyard. We can go to all the stores, and we did.
You're local.
All the stores we went into did really well. But on the East Coast, we're not going to be flying to New York and Pennsylvania every third Sunday of the month or something. So we knew we had to have somebody out there to grow the business.
So how do you hire someone? Who do you hire for that?
Yeah, so we started interviewing some people. We actually found someone that went to San Diego State, which is my alma mater, and
Right.
Matt, the other co-founder, and so it was actually just through networking. It was just through people to people, putting the rec out there and seeing who flew in. She was actually a broker in the natural food space, so she kind of knew what was going on all over the country, and so it worked out.
So I love your approach with the advisory board. That's so smart. And how do you attract a high-level advisory board and then tell them they're not going to be paid?
Well, that's always the funny part because a lot of people.
So everyone else can do the same thing.
Yeah, seriously, I would recommend it to anybody. Building an advisory board for me has been one of the most important things that we did early stage by far.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going into a genre of business that you just don't quite understand all the.
Even if you do, it's like you don't know everything, and there's people who are going to be above you and know way more than you do.
Totally. So we reached out to a few. We did a lot of networking. I'd show up to events, create just personal relationships, ask them a million questions, take them out for drinks or dinner or whatever, and then eventually ask them if they just want to be an informal advisor of sorts.
Yeah.
And so we ended up getting a solid amount of people on the advisory board, and that really did help us early on. One of the guys, his name is Jeff Grad, and he's the co-founder of Evolution Fresh Juices. And still today, he's a great friend, and he's always just been a good dude that's willing to help out. And I think in certain industries, it's going to be easier to find than others. I think in tech, it's going to be a little bit more difficult than it will be with natural foods. But those people are out there.
Why do you think?
I just think that in the natural food space, it hasn't been bastardized quite yet.
People are more open, you think?
I think they're a little more laid back, a little more willing to help. It's more community focused than tech, in my experience. Yeah. And for me, I sit on a couple of advisory boards too, and it's I don't expect to get paid or anything. I'm just wanting to help people that are doing good things. Yeah. So it's good to find people like that.
So Nick, what's some of the best advice you got from the advisory board or from one of the advisors?
The best advice. Best advice is a tough one. I think that
or the Evolution Fresh Juices. Like what good advice did he, give you or help you guide you on that really saved you a lot of time, energy, or money?
Yeah, I think that he really kind of struck home what it means to be a natural brand, what it means to be organic, what it means to stick true to those values. He also co-founded Naked Juice.
He co-founded Naked Juice?
Naked Juice, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
Massive. And, what he saw from that is that he had a lot of great learning lessons from that. So they started in San Diego just literally selling juice out of their friggin' van or whatever, out of a cooler. And they had no shelf life, and then they had to scramble to, make the shelf life longer to get into retailers.
Right.
They ended up selling the product, and now the product is something completely different than what they started with.
Right.
And so, sticking true to the core values of your business is something that I learned from Jeff in a real meaningful way.
Yeah. He's probably seen a lot of the ups and downs, I would assume.
Totally. And he's a real dude, too, and that's one thing that you find in business, a lot of people fronting or a lot of people putting on a certain sort of mask to talk to you. And Jeff is about as real as they get, so I like those types of people.
How did you meet him?
We met him through a program in San Diego called Connect, and so that's essentially a program that takes San Diego startups and tries to help them out in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to know what you consider another milestone. So, the first hire. What all other milestones you consider really that help propel the business?
Yeah, I mean, definitely our first round of investment was huge. Our first employee, our first round of interns for sure, which was really fun. Whole Foods market was a massive one. We've raised a few different rounds of capital, so those always tend to be milestones. And then also getting into key accounts. So we're in Target right now in Los Angeles.
That's amazing.
And we're doing really well there, so we'll probably be going nationwide next year. There's also a very popular coffee chain that we will likely be getting plussed out to nationally next year. Those are just some of the current milestones that are coming to mind. But those are going to be big ones for sure.
So talk about navigating financing, right? Because before, I think the candy bar was bootstrapped, right?
To start, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother animal. So what was difficult about that process that people should know about when they're considering raising capital?
A few things. I mean, luckily I was relatively well versed in startup finance, and then Matt did startup finance for his previous company, so he's really good at it. And so I think the most important thing is the concept of valuation. Valuation, especially when you're raising your first seed round or Series A or whatever you want to call it, it's really just, the number is flexible. It's not this set thing. There's no formula. There's no algorithm you can plug it into and tell you what the answer is. This is what I think I'm worth. This is why. This is who we have on our advisor board. These are the co-founders that we have to make the shit happen. And, some investors may come by and they'll say, oh, yeah, I'd love to invest in your company, but I want a different valuation. You should lower your valuation to whatever.
Of course they're going to say that.
Of course they're going to say that, right? And so it's all about sticking to your guns, man. It's having a good idea in your head, not raising too much too fast, not raising money from the wrong people. If you get the wrong people involved, it's going to be a world of shit, and you really don't want to find yourself in that situation at all. And as soon as you take money from someone that doesn't have your best interest in mind, you're in a marriage at that point. You're tied in. So take the money from the right people. Don't raise too much too fast, and really think the financing strategy out 1, 2, 3 years in advance.
Yeah. So, and Nick, if you're not allowed to answer this, that's cool. I'm wondering the most you raised in a round before, and then what you did with it.
So our current round that we're raising is the largest round. It's an undisclosed amount, so I can't disclose that, unfortunately. What we're doing with it, we're using it to plus out distribution in a large way and also ramp up consumer marketing.
So you use it for just more product?
Yeah, definitely. So, when you're going into, call it Kroger, or any chain that has 2,000, 3,000 stores, there's a lot of slotting fees associated with it. You have to market a lot. You have to do a lot of ads. You have to send people in there, bodies in the store, to demo the product, to make sure it gets off the shelves, to educate people on what's going on. Going into new retailers is very expensive and capital intensive. So, in 2017, there's going to be some big wins, some big dominoes to fall, and we have to be well capitalized to do that.
Yeah. And, I'm sure, strategically you pick the right people investing who have industry knowledge and everything like that. And I think I read an article. There's 2 people that you feel give really good advice to the company. It was Pat Finn and Scott Caue.
Yeah.
What did they tell you?
Yeah, I mean, Pat Finn, Scott Caue, all the guys at Boulder Food Group, Mark Rampolla, all these guys. Mark Rampolla is a founder of Zico Coconut Water.
Someone just told me to read his book yesterday. It's
a great book, man. It's really good.
Yeah.
It is really good. It's I just got done reading it, and I won't give any spoilers out, but it's a great book. I recommend it. And Mark's a great guy. He's giving us great advice.
This is he wrote High Hanging Fruit? High Hanging Fruit? Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Which is perfect for a banana company. No,
Totally. Yeah, those guys, I mean, they just have great advice, man. It's crazy, whether it's looking at the P&L and giving us advice there, whether it's working with certain retailers, learning lessons from their previous companies. Yeah. We have Tom was the founder of Evol Burritos, and Dayton, who was the founder of Function Beverages, and Jerry Bello, he was the founder of Mama Says, Pasta Chips, etc. We really did get a great team of investors that
have
actual operational experience, which is rare. Yeah.
So what did Mark tell you? Did he give you direct advice on the company?
Yeah, they all have tons of advice. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that Mark told me is that you shouldn't overinvest in things that don't work just because you've committed to doing those things, which is kind of the whole commitment of escalation sort of paradigm that a lot of people find themselves in, and to be wary of that. And you can see in the book several times where things get tough, and then what do? And you have to scramble, and a lot of supplier relationships and making sure you don't consolidate supply. For him, it was coconuts. For us, it's bananas into one central area, because then you're going to have to figure some shit out if they get bought by your competitor, let's say, or a different strategic. So
that's true. Yeah.
There's a lot of gems in there. Yeah, and it's funny because reading through the book, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what he was telling us.
Was he giving that advice in general, or was there a specific point he was trying to make about one of your products? Like, I know you worked hard on this one, Nick, but get rid of it.
No, I think it was just in general. You know, for us, we, kind of batter these guys with tons of questions all the time, and so usually they come up with some pretty unique and awesome answers.
Yeah. So Nick, what software do you use to run the company? Because you have a lot of moving parts. And you're a tech guy too.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
In the food space, it's kind of archaic. It's still like 1920s Prohibition era. People are still using like faxes and the printers that have like the two little tabs you rip on the sides and the whole thing. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. So we use a ton of technology. So the ones I can't live without: personal productivity, of course, Wunderlist, Evernote. I use Boomerang, Gmail offline, a lot of tools to just make sure I manage my time more efficiently.
Yeah.
Schedule One, I love using Schedule One. We also use Unleashed for our back-end inventory software, Zero for our accounting, Box.com, Talkdesk, Help Scout. We have just built a ton of systems because we want to make sure that we don't get caught with our pants down. You have to plan for growth in advance and make sure those systems are in place before you actually need them.
And then what about like shopping cart stuff for your website and things like that?
Totally. So I built the site on Shopify as the back end.
Looks beautiful.
Thanks. I enjoyed designing it. I like Shopify as a back end. It's much easier than Magento, which of course, comes with its own host of craziness. The other great thing about Shopify is their app platform. So they have a ton of just plug and play apps. You don't have to spend a lot to, try something out in development. So, we use Klaviyo for our email marketing. Used to use MailChimp. MailChimp now has some automation functionality, but I think Klaviyo, if you're using Shopify...
I've heard Klaviyo is like really the best for e-commerce people to use.
Yeah, I agree.
So any apps you love on Shopify?
Yeah, I like one of the ones that come to mind are the Recharge app. So that's a subscription app. And a surprising amount of people want bananas every single month, or every 15 days for that matter. So they subscribe, which of course is nice because then you don't have to deal with ebbs and flows of revenue and follow up and all that. So Recharge is a great one. Product reviews is great, for SEO and other purposes. I have a laundry list of apps installed. Olark, Live Chat has been a big one. The Free Shipping Bar, which is actually a free app, is a really, really nice one to have. I could go on all day.
I love hearing about it. I love hearing this stuff. How hard is it? I mean, you guys have a lot of serious logos for the Barnana snacks. Like, you're USDA organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, paleo. It's not an easy process to get certified organic, right? I mean, talk about that. That's a conscious choice. You don't have to do all those things for the product.
Totally. Especially being organic, we're never going to create a product that isn't organic. Going back to my childhood, personally, the reason that I believe it's the correct thing to do is, growing up in the country, there's a lot of cornfields and wheat fields and such. And when I was a little kid, I remember looking up and there's these planes flying and all over the place. And I thought they were watering the fields because I'm like, 6 or 7 or whatever.
Right.
And my dad came out in the morning. I'm like, Dad, look at all the planes. They're watering the fields. He's like, oh, that's not water. That's pesticides. And, where I grew up, the water table is very close to the ground. It's all groundwater.
Yeah.
And so, there's been a lot of just speculation as far as pesticides kind of poisoning the water. Yeah, and so, the more you contribute to conventional farming, the more you contribute to the use of pesticides, and it's just tough for me. So we are certified organic. It's a tough certification to get. It is a massive process.
Yeah.
I manage our organic certificate, so I'm intimately aware of all the details of it. It's a beast. It really is a beast. Non-GMO project. We have You called them all out before, but
gluten-free, kosher. Is that the kosher?
Yeah.
So you have a rabbi go out to the fields of how does that?
Yeah, it's a network of rabbis.
That's amazing. No, I know that each one of those signifies a lot of time and energy and work, and it's a conscious choice to even, because it's costly for you guys to do that.
Costly and difficult.
So, we talk about the software, we talk about some of the systems. Anything else we missed with the milestones that you're really proud of?
It's funny to say. For me, it's really hard to celebrate milestones. Each time we do something good, it's just kind of like, all right, great.
What's next?
Oh, I'm thinking of the next thing.
Yeah.
And so, kind of looking back and celebrating the wins, I guess historically I'm just not very good at doing that, for better or for worse. We've definitely had some good milestones. Safeway was a great milestone. Raising capital, like I said, all that. Building out our sales team has been a huge milestone. But for me, it's really, something great happens, high five, and what's the next thing we got to get done? So,
what are you working on now? What's next for the marketing component?
So right now I am this week, in fact, I'm designing a lot of new packaging for an upscale coffee retailer, and so doing specific packaging for them.
I'm not going to press you on that, Nick. I'm not going to press you on the name of that.
You can speculate that one out.
Right.
And so a lot of packaging design and figuring out channel strategy going to the new channels in 2017 is the big focus. Yeah.
So, Nick, I always ask this Inspired Insider 2 questions. And I'm going to ask them, but first, let's tell people where to go. I mean, they can obviously go to, is it Safeway, Whole Foods, certain Targets, Barnana.com. It's BARNANA.com. Where else can they go?
Yeah, so Barnana.com is definitely the best spot to go. We're also in Sprouts, Whole Foods, Wegmans. We're in most of the natural and organic retailers nationwide. And of course, shout out to us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, your social media platform of choice, with thoughts, feedback, requests, questions. We love interacting with people in general. So,
what's the most common frequency people purchase for recurring shipment? Because there's 15 days, 30 days, and 60-day option, right?
Yeah, 30 days is
30 days.
Is typical, yeah.
So I always ask this, Nick, what's been the lowest moment and how you push through the hard time? And then the highest or proudest moment so far. What's been the lowest for you?
The lowest point for me, there's 2 of them that come to mind. Definitely when we were first starting the business. I was still in college. I maxed out on my credit cards, defaulted on my student loans to start the company. Not something that I wanted to do, but just something that
What were you spending the money on at the time? Like, what were you paying for on the credit card?
Well, my education for one, so I did finance some of my education through credit cards, and then also just living expenses. We didn't have any income to begin with starting Barnana. We didn't raise capital right off the bat. It took us, a few months. So definitely ruining your credit's not fun, getting those calls. That was definitely a low point, although all the while having the optimism that everything would work out and it would be all for the better.
I mean, but at the time you just did what you had to do. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah, I just believed that it would work out, and I knew that I could make it happen. So, I wasn't too concerned about it, but it did drag on me a little bit. And then I think probably the only thing that surpasses that as the lowest moment is when my dad passed away about a year into the business when we were still
Sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah. This is not something I talk about a lot, right? But if you're asking me honestly, that's definitely the lowest point for sure.
Because that's a reality, Nick. You know, like when you're running a business, it's not like you're operating in a bubble, right?
Yeah.
You're operating and you have to handle all the personal stuff too.
Exactly,
you know,
right.
and then pushing through that, that's just really tough, you know, because then how do you focus on a business or anything for that matter if that stuff happens in your life, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have your head on just so tight, man. That can really wreck people, you know, especially my dad was the guy that raised me. He's my best friend, the whole thing.
Right.
You know, it was an accident. It wasn't a planned thing. So, you know, you really have to have some mental fortitude to just put your head to the grindstone and make sure that you're taking care of all the employees and investors and everything else that you've built, and not let anything fall through the cracks.
When you think of your dad, what story do you think of?
What story do I think of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably the story that I think of the most is one of the last times that I saw him. I gave him a new Barnana shirt, and he was just so stoked. And again, you know, he passed away when we were 1 year into the business, so we hadn't really built anything giant at that point. But just seeing the look on his face, man, he was excited. So that's definitely the one that comes to mind.
Knew. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Man.
It's really hard. So on the flip side, what's been some of the proudest moments for you personally?
I think probably one of the proudest moments, it was actually sort of a succession of proud moments. A few of our employees have had kids now, and I think that, you know, when you're running a business and you have employees and you know you need to take care of them and their families and everything else, being able to provide them with the income and the benefits and everything necessary to raise a newborn baby.
That's amazing.
Is something pretty special. So, you know, I've experienced that a couple times now. I think that's probably one of the high points.
Barnana babies. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. What about from the business standpoint? What's been the most, I mean, you've gotten to have a lot of success with different distribution channels. What's been personally for you been a huge win?
I think the biggest win for us is that we've grown with velocity instead of sort of the shotgun blast, low velocity, high footprint strategy. A lot of times in the food industry, you can grow one of two ways. So you can either grow through velocity, or you can grow through just having a ton of retailers that you sell in. And so for us, knowing that there's repeat purchase and people actually really do love the product and keep going back and repurchasing it on a macro level in mass, is definitely one of the most rewarding things for me. I think that seeing that velocity means that the business is growing in the right way, in a sustainable way, in a way that brands grow that last, that aren't just kind of a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
That's something I'm really proud of.
Yeah. Nik, this has been amazing. How can people best support you? Is it better for them if they're interested to get it on your site? Is it better to get it in retail? What's best?
Yeah, I think the best way is whatever's most convenient for you. You know, obviously at Barnana.com, we control all the experience. You know, any issues that anybody ever has, you can always reach out to us in customer service. You know, going in, supporting the retailers is great too, Whole Foods, etc. Really, any support is welcome support, and we just hope that we're doing something that everybody else can love. So
yeah. Thank you. Everyone check out Barnana.com. Nik, it's been amazing. I appreciate it.
Likewise, man. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you.